Good evening, everyone. Please sit comfortably and feel free to move around as you like. This isn't a retreat, just a talk. First of all, thank you to Paul and Katerina for arranging this talk. Maybe check online. Is everything okay? Can everyone hear me all right? Getting thumbs up there too.
Okay, good.
Great. I also want to thank all of you for coming here this evening. I think it's really important that we're here because the topic is important to all of us, maybe the most important of all. I really think that the ecological crisis is the greatest crisis that humanity has ever faced. Please notice what I didn't say. I didn't mention climate change or global heating. Of course, this is very important, very urgent, but really it's just part of the larger ecological crisis. And I have to say this because otherwise we might think if we just change quickly enough to renewable sources of energy, then everything else, our civilization, can continue the same way. But it's not true. The crisis is much bigger. It's really about our collective relationship with the earth, and something fundamental needs to be changed. I remember a Zen story. A student asked Chan Master Yun Men, or Unmon in Japanese, what is the fruit of a lifetime of practice, right? We meditate for so many years. What do we learn? What do we gain from this? And he replied, responding appropriately. We learn to respond appropriately to whatever situation we are in. Now, however, we are in a situation where I think our civilization seems to be self-destructing in so many ways. How do we possibly respond appropriately to that? And the question for us this evening is, what does Buddhism offer that can help us understand and respond appropriately? One answer is maybe nothing. Well, remembering the Buddha lived, maybe 2,400 years ago in a very different time and place, Iron Age India. And of course, people in those times had problems, but very different from our kind of problems. And if we read all the Buddhist texts, the sutras and shastras and so forth, none of them says anything about, the ecological challenge. That wasn't their problem, right? So we have to ask, well, can Buddhism really help us here? And I think the answer, of course, is yes. That's why we're here, right? I think there's lots of implications built into Buddhist teachings that we can see can help us today. And this evening, I would like to talk about what I think is the single most important Buddhist teaching that can help us. Let's go to the heart of the issue, right? I think it is the Bodhisattva path. But we have to understand it a little differently today, I think. So sometimes I say the new Bodhisattva path or Eco-Sattva path, right? Now, if we read the Buddhist literature, there are many, many texts, especially Mahayana texts, that talk about the Bodhisattva path. As you may know, Bodhisattvas focus on developing or perfecting 6 character traits, right? Typically, their path, they don't follow the Eightfold Path. The focus is on developing, perfecting generosity, moral behavior, patience, persistence, meditation, and wisdom, prajna paramita. This is the traditional literature, and you can read all about it many places. So I don't want to talk about that. Instead, what I would like to do is pick out three aspects that of the Bodhisattva path that I think we need to emphasize today, and that I think are especially relevant to our situation. So, three aspects. The first aspect is maybe the most basic or the most foundational, right? Bodhisattvas follow a double path, or we can say a two-sided path, like the two sides of a coin, or the two sides of my hand. On the one hand, they continue to focus on their own personal, individual transformation, and they continue those practices, like we know, meditation, maybe zazen in Zen, right? At the same time, they realize that their own personal transformation by itself isn't enough, that it's important to combine that with some kind of social involvement, social engagement, social activism. And it's not simply that the two go well together, it is more deep than that. I think that actually these two transformations, personal transformation, social transformation, they actually need each other if they are going to be as successful as we need them to be. For example, maybe you are a kind of social activist, or you know someone who is an activist. We know this is a very difficult path. Sometimes we try very hard to change something and it doesn't happen. It can be very frustrating. We can easily become burnt out. We want to give up. We don't know what to do, right? So think how important it can be if our social activism is grounded in some kind of contemplative practice, some kind of meditation, so that when we become tired, frustrated, pessimistic, we can return to our practice. We can return to our zazen, and we can recharge ourselves. We can let go of our feelings and become energetic again. Does this make sense? Yeah. I think we can see how it is that that kind of personal practice can be very important. But I think it works the other way around too. I think that for those of us interested in our own spiritual development, personal transformation, we also need to be engaged in the world. Maybe this isn't so obvious, so let me try to explain why. Right? I still remember when Paul and we started Zen practice in Hawaii at exactly the same time, 1972 in Honolulu, Kokoan Zendo, right? And yeah, it was difficult. My first Zen session, I didn't know what a session was when I signed up. It was very, very hard. But why did we come to Zen practice? Why do we come to Buddhist practice? Almost always it's because we can sense that there's something missing, something is wrong, something isn't quite right about our lives, right? And so we think by our Buddhist practice can help us, we can learn more about ourselves, we can solve this problem, we can find what is missing, right? And I think this is an appropriate beginning. But as we continue, let me say it this way. So at the beginning, it's a kind of it's part of our usual self-preoccupation. Sometimes we could even say self-centeredness, right? It's all about me. What can I get out of this practice, right? But if we continue the practice very seriously, I think we begin to realize that at the core of our problem is our self-preoccupation, right? We have these self-centered habits, and we realize that if we continue forever to worry about my own spiritual development, my own equanimity, my own enlightenment, right, my own Buddhahood, this actually starts to reinforce the problem. It's all about me, 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 and the sense of separation continues. As we begin to wake up a little bit and realize our non-duality, as we begin to see through this delusion of separation, that I'm in here and you and the world are out there, as we can see through this, then we begin to realize that the meaning of our life needs to turn around, right? The old meaning, what's in it for me, can transform into, okay, I'm connected, we're all interconnected. What can I do? What can we do to make this a better world for all of us, you see? So what I'm suggesting is that the concern for spiritual transformation is actually part of our own personal path, you see. I remember something Franz Kafka, the writer, said in a letter. He said, "You can live in such a way that you ignore the sufferings of others. You can do this. But maybe doing this, ignoring the suffering of others, maybe this is one suffering you could avoid." Is it clear? Maybe I should read it to get it right. You can hold back from the sufferings of the world. That is something you can do. But perhaps this very holding back is the one suffering you could avoid. It's saying something very deep, I think, that holding back, it reinforces the sense of separation. It reinforces the sense that I'm in here, my well-being is separate from yours. And that there's a fundamental suffering, a dukkha built into that. Maybe my all-time favorite quotation, spiritual quotation, is by, not by a Buddhist, but a Neo-Vedantin named Nisargadatta. And he said, "When I look inside and see that I am nothing, that is wisdom. When I look outside and see that I am everything, that is love. Between these two, my life flows." Right? Quite beautiful. Yeah? Wisdom says I'm nothing. Love says I'm everything. And this is Buddhism. Wisdom and love, or usually we say wisdom and compassion. And I think this shows the connection, right? Love it's not just a feeling, it's a way of being in the world that embodies this realization of non-duality, of non-separation, that I'm not in here somewhere behind the eyes or between the ears, right? I'm all of this. Each of us is all of this. Each of us is all of each other. Each of us is reflecting, embodying and reflecting everyone else. In Tibetan Buddhism, there's the famous story of the great yogi Milarepa, who walled himself, I think, in a cave, or lived in a cave for many, many years. And he, according to the story, his skin turned green from eating nettles. And he also went all the way to Buddhahood in one lifetime. But I wonder, like Joanna Macy said, the world has a role to play in our awakening. The world, meaning our interaction with other people, is part of our spiritual development. I remember this was maybe when you were living in Kokoan. I moved to the Maui Zendo, And I remember, so my first residential community was the Maui Zendo in Hawaii. Robert Aiken was the teacher. And you can imagine a Zen center in Maui, Hawaii is pretty nice place to practice. And the other thing is, basically, we were all hippies. We were all long-haired hippies, but we were very serious about our practice. And, we had Sesshin, Yamada Roshi visited, and things happened. We had little realizations, we had little experiences, openings. This was not so rare, it happened. But what many of us realized, it's in some ways, it's easier to have a realization, an opening. More difficult is to integrate that in how we actually relate to other people, right? Right? I remember Ramdas. Ramdas liked to say, "So you think you're enlightened, right? Well, go spend the holidays with your family." So we will find out very quickly where we are stuck, right? Ram Dass also talked about our practice as a two-sided sword. That maybe the meditation, the retreats are one side, but then we go out into the world and we see where we are still stuck, where the problems with relationships, and then we see that, then we go back to our sitting. So there's a kind of reciprocal. This is why Joanna said, we need the world interacting, learning how to relate to people in a new way is an essential part of our practice. The reason this is so important to emphasize is, that there are many spiritual teachers who over the years have said, don't get involved in the world, just focus on your own practice. That's the most important thing. There are times when that may be true, but to say that we should just ignore the world, I think this is a kind of false dualism now, that the situation is too dangerous and we can't do that. But more than that, we can say that when a bodhisattva is engaged in the world, trying to do the best she can or he can to help, think how in doing that, it's changing our habits. Our old self-preoccupation is replaced by more compassionate, habitual ways of relating. Yeah. So we can say that the person who benefits most from the bodhisattva activity is the bodhisattva herself or the bodhisattva himself. I remember Robert Thurman. He's a well-known Buddhist professor and Tibetan teacher, right? He liked to say, practice, practice, practice. People are always talking about practice. What I want to know is, when is the performance? And the important point isn't that the performance is part of our practice. Really, our practice is part of our performance. They really need to go together. Yeah. One of the great Japanese teachers, Kukai, one of the founders of Japanese Buddhism, Kobo Daishi also, another name. He said, the measure of our enlightenment is how we serve others. And I think that's important. And today, we need to think about what that means, not just helping others individually, but what does that mean in a world that's so dangerous? So that's the first point. Time for another sip of water. The second point is an explanation why maybe we should talk about the new Bodhisattva path. Because I think today we have a different, a bigger, and a better understanding of dukkha than in earlier Buddhist days. Do people know the word dukkha? It's usually translated into English as suffering. Yeah. The first noble truth, remember, life is dukkha, cause of dukkha, end of dukkha, eightfold path. It's all about suffering, but we have to understand it in the broadest sense, right? Not just physical, mental pain, but dissatisfaction, uh, anxiety, dis-ease, right? Traditionally, dukkha has been understood in individual terms. And this is connected with the understanding of karma, the idea that each of us is experiencing the karma we deserve from our past lifetimes. Okay? I'm not sure that this is what the Buddha intended, frankly. Remembering the time of the Buddha, some people think the Buddha had a larger vision, a kind of social transformation, that he didn't just want to create what we call religion, but he had a new vision of how society might work. Maybe he was more progressive than the institution that developed after him, right? I'm thinking about the caste system. You know, if you think about that, when people joined the order, when they became bhikkhu, bhikkhuni, a monk or a nun, monastic, they lost caste, right? You weren't supposed to even talk about caste. So his vision was a non-caste society, which is pretty radical for his time. And also, if you think about his attitude toward women. Now, every Asian Buddhist society was or became very patriarchal. The situation of women was beneath men, right? But the Buddha, he started a monastic sangha for women because he realized women have the same potential to awaken as men. In fact, I don't know if you know this, Paul, but Yamada Roshi once told me in Doksan, he said, you know, in my experience, women sometimes have an easier time than men coming to Kensho. So, you know, the idea that somehow men are superior to women spiritually, I don't believe that the Buddha believed this, frankly. But after he died, you know, the cult, when Buddhism began, we can call it a little cult, a very small, and it wanted to grow, of course, and it wants royal support, or at least royal toleration, right? I mean, if the king doesn't like you, he can squash you pretty easily at the beginning. And more than that, it would be nice if the king gives us land and money and things. So unlike the Hebrew prophets, you remember the prophets, they would criticize the kings in the Old Testament. The Buddha did not criticize the kings. Sometimes they would ask him for advice, but he didn't challenge the social order in that way. And in fact, there's a Buddhist teaching that can help rationalize the differences. The teaching of karma, right? The way karma is understood. No Asian Buddhist society was democratic. This is unfortunate, but it limited. Buddhism had to be careful in that kind of social situation. So, so the the attitude of Buddhism generally, if you think about the caste system, if someone is born a prince, well, he must have good karma from his past lifetime. So probably we should obey him, right? This would, in that kind of hierarchical society, Buddhism has to be very careful. And as a result, it seems to me, the Buddha talked about dukkha, but he didn't talk about the social dukkha. He didn't talk about the dukkha created by maybe the king. Maybe the king is a nasty king, very high taxes, or he takes the young men for his army. The Buddha didn't really talk about that. Again, the karma teaching is very much individual. So what we have is an institution, the way it developed was very much focused almost solely on your own individual karma, your own individual practice, your own individual enlightenment. Because dukkha, suffering, is understood only in individual terms. Right? I think that's not acceptable anymore. I think we have to recognize that suffering in our time is not created simply by individuals. We have structural or institutional suffering, right? For example, Buddhism talks a lot about the three poisons, the three fires: greed, ill will, and delusion. Are you familiar with this teaching? Yeah. Again, usually on the spiritual path, this is understood individually. The problem is my greed, maybe your greed too, but my greed, my ill will, your ill will too, and delusion, right? It seems to me we must recognize that today, yeah, all three of them have been institutionalized. For example, if greed means I never have enough, I always want more, right? Let's be honest. I think this describes our economic system. Really. Consumer corporate capitalism. Got to name it, right? Consumerism. The idea of consumerism is that consumers always want more. The advertising conditions us always to want more. But even more than that, you think about corporations. Corporations, when do they have enough profit? Well, never enough, right? They always want more profit, more market share. They want to grow. They want higher stock prices, right? Isn't this greed? Why is more and more always better if it can never be enough, right? It's a kind of a trap, right? And it's not simply that you have greedy oil company CEOs. If they don't do their job to maximize profits, it doesn't matter how good or bad they are as people, they're going to get pushed away, and somebody else will come in who will focus on maximizing profitability. They're not thinking about the environment, let's be honest, unless they have to, right? They're going to focus on maximizing profitability. In other words, I think greed has become institutionalized. It means it's taken on a life of its own, right? What about institutionalized ill will? Well, I'm coming from the United States, the country of the man with orange hair. Next year, our military will spend more than $1 trillion, right? In the world today, there are something like 1,200 military bases outside are outside their own country. It's like if you add up all the countries in the world, most bases are inside, but sometimes they have a base somewhere else. 1,200 outside the country. Well, guess what? About 800 of those are US bases, right? Why do we do it? Well, the story is we have to defend ourselves. We want to secure ourselves. But then other countries feel threatened. It's a kind of every country tries to secure itself. It means every country does more military and it becomes more insecure. We end up with a kind of an arms race, right? And institutionalized ill will, suspicion, right? Weapons. I mean, it seems to me this is a kind of an institutionalized system too. And every year the US military wants more and more money. And of course, this works very nicely with capitalism, the corporations, because the arms companies make a lot of money making weapons for the military. So the institutionalized greed, the institutionalized will, they go very well together, right? And even if you have someone, maybe some general says, you know, this is crazy. Our military is too big, too expensive, right? No one will ever say this, but if he ever said it, he would get pushed out, right? So again, the kind of military industrial society, it takes on a life of its own, right? This is institutionalized ill will, the kind of militarism all around the world. Right? I talk about the US because it's my country, I'm sorry, but it's not only in the United States, as we know. And what about the third, institutionalized delusion? What do you think? I mean, when I first thought about this, I thought advertising, right? Consumerism. How I tend to think of consumerism actually as religion, frankly. If religion teaches us what's important in life, how to live, consumerism is the most successful religion of all time, really. Um, and of course, consumerism has a very powerful missionary or proselytizing conversion. Right? It's called advertising. Right? The advertising is always teaching us the way to be happy is to buy something. The next thing you buy will make you happy, right? And it makes us thinking this way. For Buddhism, this is a kind of false delusion and a false thinking about who we really are, the meaning of life. But today, I think we really have to talk too about other kinds of institutionalized delusion, especially political. Right? Uh, again, I come from the land of Fox News and lots of Facebook, the company formerly known as Twitter, all of these internet programs, and a lot of money is spent to manipulate what we think, and especially to get us to vote for the candidate, right? And so in America, uh, the media, television, radio, internet, etc. In many countries, the media are mostly public, but in America, mostly private. So here we go again. We have Fox News, ABC, NBC, CBS, they're all private corporations, right? That means they exist to make money. They are not there to educate us, to make us better. They want to manipulate with advertising to buy things and to vote, right? Elon Musk, how much money did he spend on the election of Donald Trump, right? So I think we see the point. the traditional Buddhist way of thinking about delusion is my own mind, my own problems. Now, delusion is collective, delusion is institutionalized. And I think we need to recognize that. Right? Now, what does this mean for the Bodhisattva path? In the old days, the Bodhisattva path was understood usually more individually, right? Individuals help other individuals most of the time, right? And I have noticed in the United States that over the last generation, that kind of bodhisattva activity is more accepted, it's more important as part of the Buddhist path. What I mean is Buddhists maybe helping homeless people, maybe a kitchen, or hospice. When people are about to die, we have Zen hospices where Buddhist practitioners, they're spending time with people who are dying. Or prison dharma. We have Buddhist teachers go into prisons to help the inmates, to teach them how to meditate, right? This is wonderful. This is a really wonderful development. But is it enough? Right? It seems to me, it seems to me that we have become better. I'm talking about America now. I really can't say about Switzerland, but in America, it seems to me we have become much better in pulling drowning people out of the water. It's like there's a river, people are drowning, we're helping them. But we're not better yet. We have to ask, why are so many more people drowning in the river, right? Who or what is pushing them in the river upstream, you see? We have to ask these difficult institutional questions about how the institutions are working to create dukkha, suffering. The Buddha said very clearly in the Pali Canon that the only thing he taught was dukkha and how to end it. We have to keep asking what kinds of dukkha, right? What kinds of dukkha we have today and what we have to do to try to end it. Yeah. Bill McKibben, who is a big activist in the US, he's the founder 350.org, you know. He was in Paris for the climate talks, maybe 2015, 2016, something. Someone asked him, what can I do as an individual? And he said, stop being an individual. Interesting. Now, we know there are some things individually we need to do, like reduce our carbon footprint, live more simply. But his point is, you and I, individually, can we challenge the big oil corporations or Fox News? It ain't going to work, right? Mm. In other words, we have to come together to do that. And I think this is very important for Buddhism because, you know, we talk about the three jewels, the three gems. People know this, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, right? The Buddha, the teachings, and the community. I think today we have lots of teachers. I think today we have lots of teachings, so many teachers, so many books, so many podcasts. Where we are weakest in most places is Sangha, right? Traditionally, Sangha is the monastics. But in the West, in Europe and America, we have a few monastics, but that's not the center. That's not the core of Buddhism. It's mostly lay people. And for example, in Zen, it's very common. In Zen, we would come together for a retreat, for a sesshin. But in the retreat, no one's talking. You don't even look people in the eye, you just see their feet, right? And only at the end, maybe over tea, you might say hello to the person next to you, right? And then you go home. Is this enough to create genuine Sangha? I think it becomes a problem. I think this is a big challenge for contemporary Buddhism, how to create stronger Sanghas, because the situation is bad, the situation is going to get worse, we're going to need each other a lot more, right? We have to find ways to support each other, and we have to find ways to come together to challenge, the institutional problems that I mentioned. Yeah. Does it make sense? That's the second, new bodhisattva path, because we have a bigger, broader understanding of dukkha, of suffering. Yeah. Let me get some more tea here. Again, feel free to move around. You can get some water if you're okay.
It's even worse now with the Zoom. All the teachings on Zoom, we only could go on Zoom, we don't come anymore together.
Wow.
Here.
Wow. And also, many of my talks are on Zoom, including this one.
But so many people don't make any more the effort to come together.
To be together,
Yes.
right. And this is a problem, very big problem.
Yeah. Okay, we also can build up a Sangha on Zoom, but it's different.
It's not quite the same thing if you never come together, right?
It's so important to come together.
So, one more point and I'm finished, but it will take me a little while to make this third final point. Right? Here's an important thing, right? The Bodhisattva path, or we can say Buddhism doesn't tell us what to do, right? Our situation is unique. But the Bodhisattva path tells us a lot about how to do it. And there's different aspects to that, but I want to pick out one principle especially that I think is really, really important, especially for Buddhist practitioners, which is that bodhisattvas are not attached to the results of what they do, right? I probably say it better here. This is most distinctive and powerful about the spiritual activism, right? Acting without attachment to the results. And the Buddha himself says in the Pali Canon, right, the earliest teachings, he says, the actions of an awakened person are nirasa, without expectation. In the Tibetan teachings too, Lojong, aphorism 28, it says, abandon any expectation of fruition, or abandon maybe any hope of fruition, right? Don't get caught up in how you will be in the future. Stay in the present moment. Very important. Also, the Bhagavad Gita. Does anyone know the Bhagavad Gita? It's the very most famous, most popular Hindu text. It talks about different spiritual paths, and one of the paths is karma yoga. Karma literally means action. So karma yoga is the path of action, but action without attachment. It says, where does it say it? Your right is to the work, never to the fruits. Interesting. So this principle, it's not only Buddhist, but it goes beyond that. And so it's very important for us to understand what non-attachment to results means. Also, I think it's very easy to misunderstand because Buddhism, you know, emphasizes so much intention. Our intentions, our motivations are crucial. And so we might think, oh, it doesn't matter if what I do makes any difference. What's important is how pure my motivation is, right? We might think this, in which case I think nothing will ever happen because we won't try very hard, right? So it's really important to, I think, understand what's happening here. So let me unpack this a bit, okay? First of all, please consider the difference between two kinds of races. There's a 100-meter dash and a marathon, which is what, 26 miles, something long. When you are running a 100-meter dash, the only thing that is important is getting to the other end as quickly as possible. You don't have time to think about anything else. But can you run a marathon like that? You will burn yourself out very quickly, right? You have to pace yourself. And some runners I know, they emphasize when you are running a marathon, it's better not to think about the goal even. If you are running in the right direction, you will get there. You don't have to worry. What's important is to be right this step, right? Just this step, to focus on being right here. In Japanese, there's a term, tada, right? Just this. And even in Buddhism, another name for the Buddha is the Tathagata, which literally means the one who just comes, the one who just goes, right? So we focus on being right here, right now. And it makes sense too, right? Maybe we have some idea about what the result might be, but we should focus on what needs to be done right here, right? Step by step. So that's one meaning of non-attachment. Don't focus on the results. But there's a lot more to it. A marathon is a long way, but if you run, you will get to the end. What about a race with no end? Or maybe a path with no end, right? I'm thinking here about the 4 bodhisattva vows that we recite every day in Zen centers, right? The 4 vows, the bodhisattva vow. Number 1, living beings are numberless. I vow to save them all. Is that crazy or what? I mean, if you think about it, I'm promising to do something that cannot be done, right? What's the, actually, that's the point, isn't it? It's not about getting to the goal. The goal is unobtainable. It's about rearranging, refocusing the meaning of my life, right? In a permanent way. So that instead of, what's in it for me, right? No, it's like, okay, keep trying. Maybe I try to do something important. It can be anything. If I am successful with working with others, right? If I'm successful, right? We don't say, oh, that was good, we're done, right? The Bodhisattva path doesn't work like that. There's always going to be more. And it's the same thing. If we are not successful, we try, doesn't happen, well, we try again. Or maybe in a different way, or maybe this is the wrong thing to do now, maybe. But the point of this is that there's no end to it, which frankly is the kind of spirit I think we need for Eco-Dharma, because there are so many challenges, right? And when we put it this way, I know it sounds very challenging. It sounds like really tough. Oh no, I have a job, I can never retire, right? But really, when we really understand this is the way we want to live, right? There's something very joyful about this. Someone called I don't understand his name, Martin Soul Reader. Soul Reader. Is it his real name? I don't know. But anyway, he said something very interesting. He said, the world doesn't want to be saved. It wants to be loved. That's how you save it. Interesting. I think this is important, right? By saving the world, especially if we think, you know, I'm going to be a great bodhisattva and save the world, right? I remember an indigenous woman, and someone came to the village to help them, and she said, if you are here to help me, go home. But if you are here because your liberation is connected to my liberation, then let's work together. Right? Very interesting. And if we can wake up to our love for the world, all right, then we're naturally going to want to do what we can. There will be great joy, naturally feeling the joy that we want to be engaged, that we want to help, that we want to do what we can. It's not an effort, it's not dualistic. It's not that I'm the great white savior, right? The great white male, old man, straight, middle class savior, right? We don't need any more of those, right? In fact, usually they're the ones who are exploiting the situation one way and another. But there's a third and final aspect of non-attachment. So we're talking about non-attachment to results, how important that is. And there's a third aspect and final, this is the end. A third aspect that I think it's very important for us to see, especially when we realize how difficult and dangerous our situation is, right? Let's be honest, things ecologically are looking very difficult. We have been trying to do many things, they help, but is it enough? We know in some ways the world, or just my country, we're going backwards. Yeah. It might be that all of our work, all of our efforts are ineffective. We just don't know, right? We just don't know if anything we do is going to make any difference, right? We just don't know. We just don't know. Does that sound like something we might hear in Buddhism, right? Especially in Zen, but I think generally we talk about don't know mind, right? It's a very important Buddhist principle. The idea is that it's not that with our Buddhist practice, maybe we have an experience and kind of, now I understand everything about the world and how it's worked. No, it doesn't work like that. As we practice more, we realize more what we don't know. There's something fundamentally mysterious as well as sacred about this world. And that's why don't know mind is very important. Um, in the United States, the most important socially engaged Buddhist organization is the Zen Peacemakers, right? Do people here know the Zen Peacemakers? Yeah. And what's the first principle of Zen Peacemakers? Anyone remember?
No.
Sorry?
Not knowing.
Not knowing. And the second principle, anyone remember?
Bearing witness.
Sorry?
Bearing witness.
Bearing witness to the joys and sufferings of the world. And number three, acting in response to the joys and sorrows. But it starts with don't knowing, right? Or not knowing. And not knowing here isn't about like just being ignorant, but it's acknowledging. It's a kind of openness. It means we're not dogmatic. It means that we are ready to change our mind. Maybe we come to a new understanding. And also the world is changing all the time too. So don't know mind is a kind of flexibility rather than I know what's best and this creates problems. Rather, this greater flexibility of mind, I think, is absolutely essential. Um, it doesn't mean we stop because we don't know. It means we do the best we can according to what we understand, but we are ready to change that as the situation changes or as our understanding of the situation changes, right? One of my teachers, our teachers, Bob Aiken, Robert Aiken in Hawaii, right? He liked to say, our task is not to clear up the mystery, it is to make the mystery clear. Wow, interesting. Yeah, it's a good way. So it's opening up to this mystery rather than thinking, oh, now I've got it. Now I've got everything. It's more rather than grasping the truth, now I've got it. It's more opening up and being taken by something greater than ourselves. Usually, when we think about don't know mind, I think for most people, there's something discouraging or disempowering. I don't know what to do. But on the Buddhist path, I think this don't know mind is very empowering because it gives us the kind of flexibility I talked about. We do the best we can in response to the best we know, and we're always willing to change. Here, as a little kind of side note, the kind of non-attachment that I'm talking about, non-attachment to results, please notice this is very different than our usual optimism, pessimism. Like when we think about the future, it's very hard not to fall into, right, optimism or pessimism. But that's a kind of dualistic thinking, a delusive thinking that Buddhism warns us against, right? Optimism and pessimism, they kind of feed on each other. My favorite definition of a pessimist, someone who has to live with an optimist, right? Kind of the back and forth. And I think it's the same thing with hope and despair. It's kind of dualistic thinking, right? It's taking us out of here and now, and we're caught up in some idea about the future, the way we want the future to be. Yeah. Joanna Macy, who died just a couple of days ago, yeah, she said, quote, I find that assuring people there's hope is not all that useful. In Buddhism, there is no word for hope. Interesting. I think she's right in that I can't think of any Buddhist text that talks about hope. Now, in Christianity, you think about the letters of Paul, right? Faith, hope, and charity is very important if you're a Christian. But for Buddhism, Buddhism doesn't encourage hope. She says, hope would be a distraction from what's happening. It takes you out of the present moment into conjecture. All we can really affirm is where to put our attention right here and now. Joanna Macy, who said this, she also wrote a book called Active Hope.
Yeah.
But again, her idea of hope, it's not in the head. It's like possibilities in the future. But the important thing is, are we working to make these possibilities happen? That's what she means by active hope, you see. Yeah. Active hope is not waiting to be rescued by some savior. We don't sit back. Somebody will take care of us, right? No. Wendell Berry, an American poet, very fine American poet, he said, "We do not have the right to ask whether or not we are going to be successful. We don't have the right to ask that. The only question we have the right to ask is, what's the right thing for us to do right now? Yeah. What does this earth require of us if we want to continue living on it?" Right? Instead of the duality, hope and despair, or optimism, pessimism, I want to talk about another one that I think is very important, that we should keep in mind. Love and grief. Grief. Because I think grief may be very important for us, right? I remember in downtown London, there is a little stone memorial to the victims of 9/11, right? The World Trade Center attack. And the only thing the memorial says is, love is, no, grief is the price we pay for love. Grief is the price we pay for love. I think it's important for us to feel our grief, right? Many times I think we're afraid to feel our grief because it's maybe too strong. So we kind of repress it. But if we repress our grief, we are also repressing our love. The grief and the love go together. This is important because, again, well, two things. First of all, speaking personally, it seems to me that the grief that I feel is very important, and I don't want to get rid of it completely. It's like there are times when I feel a lot of grief. I think the idea isn't to work through and then it's like, although there is grief, it doesn't mean that I also don't feel joy and love and everything else. But in my mind, there's a place of grief. And that grief is very important because it reminds me what's important, you see. It's like, it's telling you, it's the grief is telling me, like, hey, David, remember what's really important, right? Don't waste, don't get caught up in small things. remember the important things, what needs to be done. So the grief is a kind of a important reminder that it's. So I think grief has a role to play in our practice. That we don't simply feel it and work it through. That it continues to be there in some way. It's also the grief, because the grief goes along with, because the grief is the other side of love. It's important that our activism be motivated, right? It's not motivated by guilt or anger or fear or I'm going to be the great savior. No, that's right. It's important that our activism is motivated by love, really, that we connect with that love. I guess I said that before, but maybe we need to keep remembering it, right? So for it, if I put all of this together, I think this points to the deepest meaning of non-attachment to results, which is simply this. Our task today, our job, is to do the very best we can without knowing if anything we do makes any difference whatsoever. Maybe it's too late in some ways. Maybe we've already passed tipping points. Maybe, we don't know. But it's okay, we don't know. Still, we have this responsibility. This is what we want to do when we're motivated by love. Of course, there's intention. We try to be strategic. We think about what we try to do. We hope it will work. We work hard. But ultimately, I think this is really important. Ultimately, our engagement is our gift to the world, our gift and a gift to each other and to the world and to the earth. And we need to think about it that way, right? And we know if I give a gift to you because I'm hoping you're going to give me something, it's not really a gift, right? A gift has to be freely given. I want to do the best I can. I don't know, I can't know if it'll make any difference, but it's still, or to say it, I don't know if what I do will be important, but I know it's important for me to do it. Something like this. Yeah. Now, maybe this all sounds very good. Actually, as we know, non-attachment to results in practice, in reality, that's not so easy, right? We know this, it's difficult. But we're also very fortunate because we have a practice that can help us. So maybe you try something that you think could be really important and it doesn't work. And so you feel frustrated naturally. But we return to our practice, our meditation. And in our meditation, we can let it go, let it go, let it go. In other words, of course, this is a kind of ideal. I'm talking about an ideal. And maybe we will always fall short. But this is the principle that we try to realize in how we practice. Yeah. Our job isn't to be perfect, but to do the best that we can, right? And frankly, it seems to me that if Buddhists, so I guess I'm trying to summarize now. I think that if Buddhists don't want to do this, that if Buddhism can't emphasize this, then given what is happening in the world, maybe Buddhism isn't what the world needs. But what I've tried to show is that I think a kind of Buddhist approach can be very empowering, that, this bodhisattva path, it really might be something really important that Buddhism can offer the world. Right? Does it make sense? Now, normally I'm finished, but I just want to add one more quick thing. Because I wrote a book on eco-dharma, and there's a copy over there, right? And thanks to Ursula, there is a German translation, right? Because I wrote a book on eco-dharma, sometimes people contact me and they say, yes, I want to be an eco-sattva. What should I do? I say, well, actually, the book says Buddhism doesn't tell us what to do. But still, they want to know. And, so what I've started now, I've started a new advice column. So I'm like a personal advice column, right? Okay. So I suggest 3 koans, or 3 questions, 3 contemplations that can help us decide what to do, okay? See, I can't tell you what to do, but I think these questions, if we meditate on them, they can help us work out for ourselves, okay? So, 3 questions. For dramatic effect, right? Actually, I'm quite dry, so this is helpful. 3 questions. Number 1, what do I have to offer? We need to think about that very seriously. Like, we need to consider, like, my age, my health, my skills, maybe my career, my networks. Are people still dependent on me, or do I depend on other people? Do I need money? Am I retired, or I still need to work? How much time do I have? Right, all of this. I think we need a kind of self-evaluation. That's the first question. The second question, given what I can offer, what are the good possibilities for me? There are so many things that need to be done. If we try to do too much, we will just spread ourselves too thin. Maybe it's really, we need to get clear how I might make a difference, given my skills, etc., right? Maybe I can contribute, maybe I can help this. And the third question, and by the way, I think these questions, they take a lot of time, right? You don't answer these questions just in a day, but kind of, reflect maybe for several days, weeks, who knows? But anyway, the third question, given the good possibilities for me, what calls to my heart? What do I feel called to do? I think it's more than ego, right? It's really a kind of meditation. Maybe something is speaking to us, something is pulling us. And it's important to get a feeling what our heart wants to do. Because of course, then we are more likely to have more energy, maybe even be more successful. So, does it make sense? Once again, what do I have to offer? Number 1. What are the good possibilities for me? Number 2. Number 3, what calls to my heart? when I first thought of this, started talking about it, I thought of it individually. But it turns out that groups can do this too. That I know of some eco-dharma groups. And they discuss it together. And this can help them decide what to do. So it's something to keep in mind. Okay. Does it make sense? I am finished. Thank you for your attention. And I have more time. We have more time. If people want to say something, to comment or ask a question, please feel free. The floor is open.